Jake had always been the kind of person who noticed things others didn't. Maybe it was because he spent most of his time sitting alone at lunch, watching the world go by. Or maybe it was because he knew what it felt like to be invisible in a crowded room. Either way, when the new girl walked into Jefferson High that cold February morning, Jake saw her before anyone else did. She was tiny, not just short, but genuinely small in every way that mattered. Her backpack looked like it might tip her over, and her oversized gray sweater hung on her frame like a 10. What struck Jake most wasn't her size, though. It was the way she moved through the hallway like she was floating just slightly above the ground, careful not to disturb anything around her. The other students barely glanced her way. In a school where being noticed meant everything, she had somehow mastered the art of being completely forgettable, almost invisible. But Jake couldn't take his eyes off her. Her skin was so pale it almost seemed to glow under the harsh fluorescent lights. Her hair was jet black and always pulled back in the same simple ponytail. But her eyes were what really got his attention. They were large and dark, and when she looked around the cafeteria during lunch, it was like she was studying everything with the intensity of a scientist examining specimens. Under a microscope, for 3 days, Jake watched her eat lunch alone. At the corner table by the windows, she never touched the school food. Instead, she pulled out these strange containers that looked like they belonged in a science lab rather than a lunchbox. The food inside looked normal enough from a distance, but there was something different about the way she ate it, methodical, like she was following instructions rather than enjoying a meal. On Thursday, Jake made his move. He'd been the lonely kid long enough to recognize another outsider when he saw one. Picking up his tray, he walked over to her table, his heart beating faster with each step. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked, trying to sound casual. She looked up at him with those enormous eyes, and for a moment, Jake felt like she was looking right through him. Not in a rude way, but like she was processing information about him that he didn't even know he was giving off. "You may sit," she said finally. Her voice was soft and careful, with the slightest accent he couldn't quite place. It wasn't Spanish, or French, or anything he recognized from his foreign language classes. It was something else entirely. "I'm Jake," he said, settling into the plastic chair across from her. "I'm called Luna," she replied, and even the way she introduced herself was strange. Not "I'm Luna" or "My name is Luna," but "I'm called Luna," like it was a title someone had given her rather than something she'd been born with. The conversation that followed was unlike any Jake had ever had. Luna spoke in complete, careful sentences, as if she was translating everything in her head before letting it out. When he asked where she was from, she tilted her head to one side and said, "A place that is very far from here." When he pressed for more details, she simply smiled and asked him about his classes instead. But it wasn't just the way she talked that was strange. It was the question she asked. While most people his age wanted to know about sports or movies or gossip, Luna asked things like, "Why do students form groups that exclude others? And what is the purpose of the competition between peers?" At first, Jake thought she might be from another country, maybe somewhere where English wasn't the first language. But as the days went by and they continued eating lunch together, he realized it was more than that. Luna observed their school like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. She took mental notes on everything from the way people walked in the hallways to the unspoken rules about where different groups could sit in the cafeteria. "The social structure here is very complex," she said one day, watching a group of popular kids claim their usual table near the center of the room. "There are hierarchies within hierarchies. It's quite fascinating." Jake laughed. "Fascinating isn't the word I'd use, more like exhausting." Luna turned those large eyes on him with genuine curiosity. "You do not enjoy participating in the social competition?" "I don't think I'm very good at it," Jake admitted. "I've always been more of an observer than a participant." "Observers see things others miss," Luna said. And something in her tone made Jake think she knew exactly what she was talking about. As the weeks passed, Jake found himself looking forward to lunch in a way he never had before. Luna was unlike anyone he'd ever met. She was incredibly smart, especially in science classes where she seemed to understand concepts before the teachers even finished explaining them. But she struggled with things that seemed simple to everyone else. Pop culture. References went completely over her head. She didn't understand sarcasm. And she had this habit of taking everything people said at face value, which led to some amusing misunderstandings. The other students started to notice Luna, but not in a good way. They whispered about her pale skin and strange clothes. They made jokes about her accent and the way she asked odd questions in class. Jake watched it all happen and felt a familiar anger building in his chest. He'd been on the receiving end of that kind of treatment before, and he knew how much it hurt. But Luna never seemed bothered by it. She observed the cruel comments and social exclusion with the same detached interest she showed everything else. It was like she was taking notes on human cruelty the same way. She might study a chemical reaction in chemistry class. Doesn't it bother you? Jake asked one day after a particularly mean comment from some girls in their English class. Luna considered this for a moment, the thoughtful expression crossing her face. Should it bother me? Well, yeah, they're being really mean to you. They are exhibiting territorial behavior, Luna said matter-of-factly. It is a common response when a new individual enters an established group dynamic. I find it interesting rather than hurtful. Jake stared at her. You talk about people like we're animals in a nature documentary. Luna's eyes widened slightly, and for just a moment, Jake thought he saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, maybe, or concern. I apologize, she said quickly. I did not mean to sound clinical. I am still learning how to interact properly with people my age. There was something about the way she paused before saying people my age that stuck with Jake, like she had been about to say something else entirely. But then Luna smiled, and the moment passed, and Jake forgot all about the strange pause in her words. He was too busy being grateful that someone as interesting and kind as Luna had chosen to be his friend. He had no idea how wrong he was about her being kind and gentle. He had no idea that in a few months, this tiny, soft-spoken girl would pin him against a tree with superhuman strength and show him that everything he thought he knew about her was completely and utterly wrong. For now, though, Jake was just happy to have found someone who made him feel less alone in the world, even if that someone was the strangest person he'd ever met. Spring arrived at Jefferson High like a breath of fresh air, and with it came changes that Jake never saw coming. What started as simple lunch conversations with Luna had grown into something he'd never experienced before, a real friendship. Every day, Jake found himself looking forward to their time together. Luna had this way of making even the most boring school day feel like an adventure. She'd point out things he'd never noticed before, like how the patterns on the cafeteria floor created optical illusions, or how the sound of students talking in the hallway had a rhythm to it, almost like music. But the more time Jake spent with Luna, the more questions he had about her. Take her lunch, for example. While everyone else complained about the terrible cafeteria food, Luna never even looked at it. Instead, she brought these perfectly organized meals in containers that looked like they belonged in a high-tech laboratory. The food itself looked normal enough, vegetables, some kind of protein, what appeared to be bread, but it was all arranged with mathematical precision. Every piece was exactly the same size, every color perfectly balanced. Where do you get this stuff? Jake asked one day, watching her eat what looked like perfectly round orange spheres. That might have been some exotic fruit. My guardian prepares it, Luna said, which was her standard answer for pretty much everything. Her guardian did this, her guardian said that. Jake had started to wonder if this mysterious guardian even existed. What's your guardian like? He pressed. Luna paused, one of those orange spheres halfway to her mouth. Very practical, she said finally, focused on nutrition and efficiency. Jake waited for more, but that was all he got. Luna had this talent for giving answers that weren't really answers at all. The mystery deepened in their classes together. Luna was brilliant, not just smart, but brilliant in a way that didn't make sense. In chemistry, she could predict the results of experiments before they even started them. In physics, she understood concepts that made Jake's head spin, and she explained them like they were simple facts about the weather. But here's what really got Jake's attention. Luna never took notes, ever, while every other student frantically scribbled down everything the teachers said. Luna just sat there, listening with that intense focus of hers. And yet, when test time came round, she scored perfect marks on everything. "How do you remember all this stuff?" Jake asked after she aced another chemistry test without studying. "I have a good memory," Luna said. But there was something in her voice that made Jake think she was holding back. "A good memory? Luna, you just recited the entire periodic table backwards. That's not a good memory. That's like a computer or something." Luna went very still. "Computers are useful tools," she said carefully, "but they lack intuition. They cannot understand the beauty in the patterns of atomic structure the way a thinking being can." The way she said thinking being instead of person stuck with Jake for the rest of the day. It was such a weird way to phrase it, like she was being extra careful about her word choice. As the weeks went by, Jake started to notice other strange things about Luna. She knew stuff about their town that she shouldn't know, like the fact that the old clock tower downtown hadn't worked properly since 1987, or that there used to be a movie theater where the parking lot behind the school now stood. When Jake asked how she knew these things, she'd get that distant look in her eyes and say she'd heard it somewhere. But the weirdest thing was how Luna seemed to know things about people before they happened. She mentioned that their English teacher seemed stressed about something, and sure enough, the next day they'd find out about his divorce. She'd suggest they take a different route to class, and they'd later discover there had been some kind of accident in the hallway they usually used. "It's like you can see the future or something," Jake joked one day. Luna's expression became very serious. "The future is not fixed," she said. "It is a collection of possibilities based on current patterns and behaviors. If you observe carefully enough, you can predict which possibilities are most likely to occur." Jake stared at her. "You're 17 years old. You shouldn't talk like a philosophy professor." "How should I talk?" Luna asked, and there was something almost vulnerable in her voice. "I don't know. Like a normal teenager, I guess." Luna was quiet for a long moment. "I'm trying to learn," she said softly. "But sometimes I forget how to be normal." That conversation bothered Jake more than he wanted to admit. There was something about the way Luna said "I forget how to be normal" that didn't sit right with him. Like being normal was something she had to actively work at, rather than something that came naturally. The social situation at school wasn't getting any better for Luna either. If anything, the other students were getting meaner. They'd started calling her Ghost Girl because of how pale she was, and how quietly she moved through the hallways. Someone had even started a rumor that she was some kind of vampire, which was ridiculous. But high school students weren't exactly known for their logical thinking. Jake found himself getting angrier and angrier about the way they treated her. Luna was the kindest, most interesting person he'd ever met. She listened when he talked about his problems. She helped him understand his homework without making him feel stupid. She remembered details about his life that even his own family forgot sometimes. But Luna herself seemed completely unaffected by the bullying. She observed it all with that same scientific detachment she applied to everything else. When someone made a cruel comment, she'd tilt her head slightly and watch them like she was studying their behavior for some kind of research project. "Why don't you ever get mad?" Jake asked her one day after a particularly nasty encounter with some kids from their history class. "Anger is an inefficient emotion," Luna said. "It clouds judgment and leads to poor decision-making. But doesn't it hurt when they say those things about you?" Luna looked at him with those large, dark eyes. "Does it hurt you when they say those things about me?" "Of course it does. You're my friend." "Then perhaps that is enough," Luna said. "Perhaps having one person who cares is worth more than having many people who do not." Jake felt something warm spread through his chest at her words. He'd never had a friend who talked about friendship like it was something precious and important. But even as their friendship grew stronger, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that there were huge pieces of Luna's life that she wasn't sharing with She never talked about her past. Never mentioned other friends or family besides the mysterious guardian. She had no social media, no photos, no stories about elementary school or middle school or anything that came before Jefferson High. It was like Luna had simply appeared in the world fully formed, with no history and no connections to anything, or anyone except this guardian figure who remained completely invisible. Jake told himself it didn't matter. Maybe Luna was just a private person. Maybe she'd had a difficult childhood she didn't want to talk about. Maybe the guardian was overprotective and kept her isolated from the world. But deep down, a small voice in Jake's head was starting to whisper that something wasn't right. Something about Luna didn't add up. And as much as he cared about her, as much as he valued their friendship, he couldn't completely silence that voice. He had no idea how right that voice was. He had no idea that his quiet, gentle friend was hiding secrets that would change everything he thought he knew about the world. For now, though, he was content to enjoy their friendship and ignore the growing list of questions that had no answers. After all, everyone had secrets, right? How dangerous could Luna's possibly be? The first real crack in Luna's perfect facade happened on a Tuesday in late April. During what should have been a routine physics lab, Jake had always hated lab work. Too many ways for things to go wrong, too many opportunities to look stupid in front of the class, but Luna made it bearable. She had this calm confidence that made even the most complicated experiments seem manageable. They were working with electromagnetic fields that day, setting up a demonstration with copper coils and powerful magnets. The equipment was old and temperamental, the kind of stuff that had been used by students for decades. Jake was fumbling with the connections when he heard a sharp crackling sound, like electrical wires shorting out. What happened next took less than 3 seconds, but Jake would replay it in his mind for months afterward. The electromagnetic generator overloaded. Sparks flew from the control panel as dangerous levels of electricity surged through the equipment. Jake saw the flash of light and instinctively stepped backward, but he was moving too slowly. The whole apparatus was about to explode right in front of him. Then Luna moved. It wasn't human movement. Jake had seen athletes before, had watched Olympic sprinters and martial artists on TV. This was different. Luna didn't run or jump or dive. She simply appeared beside the equipment, her hands moving in a blur as she disconnected power sources and rerouted electrical currents. With impossible precision, her movements were so fast they left after images, and her hands seemed to know exactly where every wire and connection was without looking. In the space of a heartbeat, she had completely dismantled the dangerous setup and contained the electrical surge. The sparks died out, the crackling stopped, and the lab fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. 20 students stood frozen, staring at Luna, who was now standing calmly beside the neutralized equipment as if nothing unusual had happened. Her breathing wasn't even elevated. "Is everyone okay?" Mr. Peterson, their physics teacher, called out, rushing over to examine the equipment. "What happened here?" "The generator overloaded," Luna said in her typical calm voice. "I disconnected the power source to prevent damage." Mr. Peterson looked at the dismantled equipment, then at Luna, then back at the equipment. "How did you know which wires to disconnect? This is advanced electrical work. And how did you move so fast?" Luna tilted her head in that thoughtful way of hers. "I have experience with electrical systems, and I suppose adrenaline made me move quickly." But Jake had been standing right next to her. He hadn't seen any signs of adrenaline. No shaking hands, no rapid breathing, no panic in her eyes. She had moved with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this exact thing 1,000 times before. After class, Jake cornered Luna by her locker. "What was that back there?" "What do you mean?" Luna asked, organizing her books with her usual methodical precision. "You move like, I don't know, like you had superpowers or something. And how did you know exactly which wires to disconnect? We've only been studying basic electromagnetic theory." Luna was quiet for a long moment. "I have good reflexes," she said finally, "and I learn quickly." "Luna, that wasn't quick learning. That was expert-level knowledge." Like you'd been working with that kind of equipment your whole life. Something flickered across Luna's face, an expression Jake had never seen before. For just a moment, she looked almost frightened, but then it was gone, replaced by her usual serene composure. "Perhaps I should have let the equipment explode," she said softly. "Would that have been more normal?" The sadness in her voice made Jake's chest tighten. "No, I'm glad you stopped it. I'm just trying to understand how you did it. Some things are difficult to explain," Luna said, closing her locker with a soft click. That incident opened Jake's eyes to things he'd been missing before. Over the next few weeks, he started paying closer attention to Luna's behavior, and what he saw made his growing suspicions impossible to ignore. Luna never got tired. While other students dragged themselves through the hallways after lunch, Luna maintained the same energy level from morning until the final bell. She never yawned, never rubbed her eyes, never showed any signs of fatigue. She never got sick either. During flu season, when half the school was home with various illnesses, Luna never missed a single day. She never sniffled, never coughed, never showed any symptoms of any kind of illness. And then there were the things she knew that she shouldn't know, like the fact that the school's fire alarm system was going to malfunction exactly 3 days before it actually did, or her casual mention that the construction work downtown was going to uncover some interesting historical artifacts, which turned out to be true when they found remnants of the town's original settlement. "How do you know this stuff?" Jake asked after Luna correctly predicted that their substitute teacher would be called away for a family emergency. "I observe patterns," Luna said. "People's behavior often follows predictable trajectories. But you can't observe patterns about things that haven't happened yet." Luna looked at him with those large, dark eyes. "Can I?" The way she said it made Jake's skin crawl. There was something in her tone that suggested she wasn't asking a question. She was stating a fact that Jake wasn't ready to understand. But the thing that really got to Jake was Luna's appearance. He'd been friends with her for months now, and she looked exactly the same as the day they met. Not similar, identical. Her skin had the same pale perfection. Her hair fell in exactly the same way. Even her clothes seemed to never wear out or fade. Meanwhile, Jake had grown at least an inch taller. His voice had gotten deeper, and he finally started needing to shave regularly. Normal teenage changes that Luna seemed completely immune to. "Don't you ever change?" he asked one day, trying to sound casual. "Change how?" Luna replied. "I don't know. Grow taller. Get different clothes. Cut your hair differently. You look exactly the same as when I first met you." Luna touched her ponytail self-consciously. "I prefer consistency. But people change. It's normal. It's human nature." The word human seemed to hang in the air between them. Luna went very still, and Jake saw something flicker behind her eyes again, that same expression he glimpsed after the lab incident. "Yes," she said quietly, "human nature." The breaking point came when Jake decided he couldn't stand not knowing anymore. Luna had mentioned living with her guardian in the Riverside neighborhood, so Jake looked up her address in the school directory. He told himself he wasn't spying. He was just curious about where his friend lived. Maybe if he saw her house, met this mysterious guardian, some of his questions would finally have answers. The address led him to Riverside Drive, a quiet street, lined with modest homes and old oak trees. Jake rode his bike slowly down the street, checking house numbers until he found the one listed for Luna in the school records. But when he reached the address, there was no house. The lot was empty except for overgrown grass and a few scattered pieces of concrete that might have been the foundation of a building that had been torn down years ago. Wild weeds grew up through cracks in what remained of an old driveway, and a rusty mailbox hung at an angle from a rotting wooden post. Jake checked the address 3 times, certain he'd made a mistake. But the numbers were right. According to the school, this empty lot was where Luna lived with her guardian. Standing there in the overgrown grass, Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. This wasn't just weird anymore. This was impossible. People couldn't live in empty lots. They couldn't give fake addresses to schools and get away with it for months. But as Jake turned to leave, something caught his eye. there. Half buried in the tall grass near the back of the lot was a metallic gleam, something silver and smooth, was embedded in the earth, catching the afternoon sunlight. Jake pushed through the weeds to get a closer look, and what he saw made his blood run cold. It looked like metal, but not like any metal he'd ever seen before. It was perfectly smooth, with no seams or joints, and it seemed to extend deep into the ground. The surface had an almost liquid quality, like mercury that had been frozen in place. He reached out to touch it, then pulled his hand back. Every instinct he had was screaming that this was dangerous, that he shouldn't be here, that he was looking at something he wasn't supposed to see. Jake stumbled backward through the weeds, his heart pounding. He climbed onto his bike and pedaled away as fast as he could. But he couldn't escape the questions that were now screaming in his head. Who was Luna really? Where did she actually live? What was that thing buried in the empty lot? And why had she lied to him about something as basic as her address? As Jake rode home through the quiet suburban streets, he realized that his friendship with the strange, gentle girl who had seemed so vulnerable was built on a foundation of lies. And he had no idea how deep those lies went, or what kind of truth was hiding underneath them. All he knew was that tomorrow, he was going to confront Luna and demand real answers. He was going to find out who she really was, no matter what it cost him. He had no idea that the cost would be everything he thought he knew about the world. Jake couldn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that strange metallic surface buried in the empty lot where Luna was supposed to live. His mind kept racing through all the weird things he'd noticed about her over the past months, and now they weren't just quirks anymore. They were evidence that something was seriously wrong. By morning, Jake had made up his mind. He was going to confront Luna and get the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it made both of them. He couldn't keep pretending that everything was normal when it clearly wasn't. School felt different that day. Jake found himself watching Luna with new eyes during their morning classes. The way she never blinked when she was concentrating. How she always knew the answers before the teachers finished asking the questions. The fact that she never seemed to need to use the bathroom or get a drink of water like every other human being on the planet. When lunchtime came, Jake's stomach was in knots. Luna was already sitting at their usual table, eating her perfectly arranged meal from those weird containers. She looked up and smiled when she saw him approaching, and for a moment, Jake almost lost his nerve. She looked so small and innocent, sitting there. But then he remembered the empty lot and the buried metal, and his determination came flooding back. "We need to talk," Jake said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Of course," Luna said, closing her food container with that same methodical precision she applied to everything. "What would you like to discuss?" Jake took a deep breath. "I went to your house yesterday." Luna went very still. Not the normal kind of still when someone is surprised, but completely motionless. Like someone had pressed a pause button on her entire existence. "My house," she said carefully. "The address you gave the school. Riverside Drive. I rode my bike there." Luna's large eyes seemed to get even larger. "Why would you do that?" "Because I wanted to understand you better. Because I've been asking you questions for months and you never give me real answers. Because something about you doesn't add up. And I thought maybe if I saw where you lived, it would make sense." "And what did you find?" Luna asked, though something in her voice suggested she already knew. "An empty lot," Jake said, his voice getting louder despite his efforts to stay calm. "Nothing but weeds and old concrete, and some kind of metal thing buried in the ground that looked like nothing I've ever seen before." Other students at nearby tables were starting to glance their way, but Jake didn't care anymore. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "Who are you, Luna? Really? Because you're not just some transfer student from far away. You don't age. You don't get tired. You don't get sick. You know things you shouldn't know, and you can do things that are impossible. And now I find out you don't even live where you said you live." Luna stared at him for a long moment, and Jake saw emotions flickering across her face that he'd never seen before. Fear, sadness, and something that looked almost like guilt. "You wouldn't understand," she said finally, her voice barely audible. Try me, Jake shot back. I think I deserve some honesty after being your friend for all these months, friend. Luna repeated, like she was testing the word. Yes, you have been a friend. The first real friend I have ever had. Then trust me enough to tell me the truth, Luna. Looked around the cafeteria at all the normal human teenagers eating their normal human lunches and living their normal human lives. When she looked back at Jake, there was something different in her expression, something resigned. Your species wouldn't be ready for this knowledge, she said quietly. The word hit Jake like a physical blow. My species? Luna's hand flew to her mouth, as if she was trying to take the words back. But it was too late. They hung in the air between them like a confession. You said my species, Jake repeated, his voice shaking. Not people, or humans, or everyone. You said my species like you're not part of it. Luna's composure was cracking. For the first time since Jake had known her, she looked genuinely panicked. I misspoke. I meant no. Jake interrupted, standing up from his chair. You meant exactly what you said. You're not human, are you? The question hung between them, and Jake saw the last of Luna's carefully constructed mask fall away. She looked at him with those enormous dark eyes, and he saw something ancient and tired looking back at him. Jake, please, she whispered. You don't understand what you're asking. But Jake was past caring about understanding. Months of suppressed suspicion and confusion boiled over into anger and betrayal. I'm asking because you've been lying to me since the day we met. I thought you were my friend, but you're some kind of what? Spy experiment. What are you? His voice had risen again, and now other students were definitely staring. Luna glanced around nervously, and for the first time, Jake saw her look truly afraid. Not here. She said urgently, if you want answers, meet me after school. Behind the building, in the woods, but not here. Why should I trust anything you say? Jake demanded. You've lied about everything else. Luna stood up, and despite her small size, there was suddenly something commanding about her presence. Because if you want the truth, that's the only way you're going to get it. And because despite everything, you are my friend, and I don't want to see you hurt. Something in her tone made Jake's anger falter. There was a sadness there that seemed too deep for someone who was supposed to be 17 years old. Fine, he said. 3:30. But I want real answers this time. No more riddles. No more deflection. I want to know what you are and why. You're here. Luna nodded slowly. You'll get your answers, she said. But Jake, once you know the truth, you can't unknow it. Are you sure this is what you want? I'm sure, Jake said, though part of him was already starting to doubt that decision. Luna gathered her belongings with the same careful precision she always used. But Jake could see her hands trembling slightly. As she walked away, she paused and looked back at him. For what it's worth, she said softly, being your friend has been the most human thing I've ever experienced. Then she was gone, leaving Jake alone with his racing thoughts and a growing sense that he was about to learn something that would change his life forever. The rest of the school day passed in a blur. Jake couldn't concentrate on any of his classes. His mind kept circling back to that moment when Luna had said your species and the look of panic that had crossed her face when she realized what she'd revealed. When the final bell rang, Jake made his way to the woods behind the school with legs that felt like lead. Part of him wanted to turn around and pretend this conversation had never happened. Part of him wanted to keep living in the comfortable lie that Luna was just a weird but harmless girl who happened to be really smart. But he couldn't. Not anymore. He needed to know the truth, no matter how strange or frightening it might be. As he walked into the shadows between the trees, Jake had no idea that in the next few minutes, his small, gentle friend was going to pin him against a tree with impossible strength and show him that everything he thought he knew about the world was wrong. He was about to discover that some truths were too big for one person to carry alone. The woods behind Jefferson High were quiet except for the rustling of leaves. In the late afternoon breeze, Jake had been waiting for 10 minutes when he heard footsteps approaching through the trees. Luna emerged from the shadows, looking smaller and more fragile than ever in the dappled sunlight. You came, she said softly. I said I would, Jake replied, though his heart was hammering in his chest. I want answers, Luna. Real ones this time. Luna walked over to the large oak tree where they used to sit during lunch breaks when the weather was nice. She pressed her palm against the rough bark, and Jake noticed that her hand was trembling. Where do I even begin? She said, more to herself than to him. Start with what you are. Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady, because you're not human, are you? Luna was quiet for so long that Jake wondered if she was going to answer at all. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. No, she said, I'm not human. Even though Jake had suspected it, hearing her say it out loud still hit him like a punch to the gut. Then what are you? Luna turned to face him, and in the dim light filtering through the trees, her pale skin seemed almost luminescent. I'm what you would call an extraterrestrial, from a planet your people don't have a name for, in a solar system your telescopes haven't discovered yet. Jake's legs suddenly felt weak. He leaned against a nearby tree for support. You're an alien. I prefer the term off-world visitor, Luna said with a sad smile. But yes, that's accurate. How old are you? Really? In your years? About 230. Jake's mind reeled. 200. But you look 17. My people age differently than yours. We live much longer, develop much more. Slowly, by our standards, I'm barely an adult. Your people, Jake repeated numbly. How many of you are there? Here on Earth currently, just me in this region. But there are others scattered across your planet, conducting similar research. Research? Jake's voice cracked. What kind of research? Luna's expression grew pained. We're scouts, Jake. Advanced teams sent to study Earth and its dominant species before first contact, Jake said slowly. You mean like invasion? No. Luna said quickly, taking a step toward him. Not invasion, but contact. Official contact between our species and yours. My people believe it's time for your world to know they're not alone in the universe. Jake felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. And you're here to, what? Figure out if we're ready to study your social structures, your technology, your potential for peaceful coexistence, to determine the best way to make contact without causing panic or chaos. But something went wrong, Jake said. Remembering her earlier words about being recalled, Luna's shoulders sagged. Everything went wrong. I was supposed to remain objective, to observe without forming attachments. But then I met you, and she paused, struggling with the words. I began to care about individual humans rather than studying humanity as a whole. My superiors call it emotional contamination. Emotional contamination, Jake repeated bitterly. That's what they call friendship. My people don't form bonds the way humans do, Luna explained. We value logic, efficiency, the greater good. Personal attachments are seen as weaknesses that compromise judgment. Jake stared at her, trying to process everything she was telling him. So our friendship, it ruined your mission, yes? Luna said simply, and because of that, I'm being recalled. My ship arrives tonight. Your ship? Jake's voice was getting higher. You have a spaceship? It's what was buried in that lot where you thought I lived. Most of it is underground, hidden beneath a perception field that makes humans see only empty land. But you saw through it somehow, saw the metal. Jake thought about that strange, mercury-like surface he glimpsed in the weeds. That was your spaceship, part of it. The rest extends deep underground. It's been my home for the past 3 years while I conducted my observations. 3 years? Jake felt another wave of unreality wash over him. You've been here for 3 years, pretending to be a teenager. I've been studying your educational system, your social hierarchies, the way young humans form relationships and learn about the world. The teenage years seemed like the most complicated time in human development, the most important to understand. Jake was quiet for a moment, trying to absorb everything. Then anger began to build in his chest again. So I was just, what, a lab rat? An experiment? No, Luna said firmly, taking another step closer. That's just it, Jake. You were never supposed to be an experiment. I was supposed to observe from a distance, take notes, report back. But then you sat down at my lunch table that first day. And you were kind to me when no one else was. You treated me like I mattered. Because you did matter, Jake said, his voice breaking slightly. You were my friend, the best friend I've ever had. And you were mine, Luna said, tears beginning to form in her large eyes. The first friend I've ever had, actually. My people don't have friendship the way humans do. We have colleagues, associates, but friendship, the way you cared about my well-being, remembered things that were important to me, defended me when others were cruel. That was completely new to me. Jake felt his anger beginning to fade, replaced by a deep sadness. So what happens now? You just leave. Go back to your planet and report that humans are. What? Not ready for contact. I don't know, Luna admitted. My mission was compromised the moment I allowed myself to care about you. My observations are tainted by personal bias. I can't give an objective report about human readiness for contact, because I'm no longer capable of seeing humans as test subjects. Maybe that's good, Jake said quietly. Maybe caring about people is exactly what your superiors need to understand about humans. Luna smiled sadly. I tried to explain that in my preliminary reports, that human emotional bonds aren't weaknesses, but strengths, that your capacity for compassion and loyalty makes you remarkable, not inferior. But they didn't understand. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything Luna had revealed settling between them. Then Jake asked the question he'd been dreading. When do you have to leave? Tonight. When the ship finishes its recall sequence, round midnight. Jake felt something break inside his chest. Will you ever come back? I don't know, Luna said honestly. Failed scouts usually aren't given second chances. I'll probably be reassigned to deep space observation or data analysis, somewhere I can't cause any more emotional contamination. That's not fair, Jake said fiercely. You didn't fail at anything. You learned something important. You proved that your people and humans can be friends. Try explaining that to a council of beings who see emotion as a design flaw. Luna said with a bitter laugh. Jake was quiet for a moment, then asked, what will happen to me? Will I remember any of this? Luna reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, crystalline device that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. This is a memory adjustment tool. Standard protocol requires me to use it before I leave, to protect the secrecy of our presence here. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. You're going to erase my memory? I'm supposed to, Luna said, staring at the device in her palm. But I don't want to. These months with you, this friendship we've built, I don't want to take that away from you, even if it means breaking another protocol. Then don't, Jake said urgently. Keep the memory adjustment thing. Let me remember you. Luna looked up at him with those enormous dark eyes. If you remember, you'll spend the rest of your life knowing that there's intelligent life throughout the universe, and that most humans aren't ready to know about it yet. You'll have to carry that secret alone. I can handle it, Jake said. Though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. Luna studied his face for a long moment, then slowly put the device back in her pocket. Okay, she said. I'll let you remember. But Jake, if anyone ever asks you about strange things that happened during your junior year, if government agents or scientists start asking questions, I'll tell them I have no idea what they're talking about, Jake finished. I'm good at keeping secrets. I know you are, Luna said softly. It's one of the things that made you such a good friend. They spent the next few hours sitting under the oak tree, talking about everything and nothing. Luna told him about her home planet, with its purple skies and crystalline cities. She described the technology her people used, the way they traveled between stars, the vast network of civilizations that existed beyond Earth's solar system. In return, Jake told her about his dreams for the future, his fears about growing up, all the normal human concerns that had seemed so important before he learned that his best friend was from another world. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Luna stood up. I have to go, she said reluctantly. The ship will be ready soon. Jake stood too, not wanting this moment to end. Will you think about me after you leave every day? Luna said without hesitation. You taught me what it means to be a friend, Jake. You showed me that connection between beings isn't a weakness. It's the most beautiful thing in the universe. I'll carry that with me wherever I go." She reached into her pocket again and pulled out another small device, this one shaped like a smooth stone. "This is for you," she said, pressing it into his palm. "It's a communication beacon.